Hi, I'm Jordan Tannahill, and I'm the author of Listeners. I'm going to read an excerpt from near the beginning of the book. Claire is going to sleep one night with her husband Paul, and she begins to hear a low-frequency hum that he can't hear. And it's beginning to really irritate her. So she gets up out of bed, walks downstairs to the ground floor of the house, and in the dark begins to sort of look around trying to find the source of the sound. Claire! Paul called from upstairs. I should have just left it then. I should have walked back up to bed, folded myself into Paul's warmth, closed my eyes, and put it out of my head. That would have been the end of it, and my life would have stayed as it always had. But it was already too late. It had gotten under my skin. And believe me when I say that I'm not an obsessive person. I don't fuss about details. I'm not a perfectionist. I couldn't give a shit if the house was spotless, even for company. But for some reason, I just couldn't let it go. A part of me was probably thinking that the sound indicated some issue with the house, which was still relatively new and slapped up quickly like all tract housing, and we were constantly finding problems with the pipes or the air ducts or the seals around the windows. I'll be up in a minute, I called back. But I wasn't. I stalked around the house for another 2 hours, long after Paul had given up on me and fallen asleep. I moved around in the dark, navigating furniture through muscle memory, stopping every so often to hold my breath and make myself as quiet as possible. The noise persisted, low and droning with very little variation or modulation. Sometimes I thought I detected a slight bend in pitch, but then I think I was simply focusing on it too intently. I searched the living room, the basement, the garage. I unplugged every appliance, the Wi-Fi router, the microwave, the TV, the hot water heater, gutting the smoke detectors of their batteries. At one point, I even flipped the breaker. As I did, I suddenly remembered being 6 and losing power in a lightning storm. There was something revelatory about the silence that followed. I never considered that our house had a nervous system, or that it whined so loudly. I marveled that there were sounds we could only perceive in their absence, and found it unsettling to realize how much I had managed to condition myself not to hear, how much I had to tune out just to get by. Eventually, I took 2 Ambien and crawled into bed, my heart pounding out of frustration. I stuffed a pillow over my head. After half an hour, I fished a set of earplugs out of the drawer below the sink in the ensuite, but they did nothing. I lay there trying to meditate. I did some stuff with my chakras. I opened my eyes and saw the clock turn 3, then 4. The noise wasn't at all loud. In fact, I'm sure most people would have had to strain to hear it. But to me, in the silence of the house, it began to feel all-consuming. It was a bit like overhearing a couple's whispered conversation behind you at a restaurant, and then being completely unable for the life of you to focus on anything else. Not the noise of the other diners, not the waiter, not the person sitting right in front of you. By 4:30, I couldn't lie still a moment longer. I took out my earplugs, walked back downstairs, and out the front door. The night was warm. There wasn't a breath of movement on the street. No wind disturbing the leaves or planes tracing the sky. Just the smell of creosote and ionized air, of rain amassing somewhere in the distance. The stillness lent everything the uncanny feeling of a film set. Perhaps one of those horror films where some infernal force kills off the teenagers of the neighborhood one by one. Those always seem to be set in neighborhoods like these. Catalog homes, young trees, driveways lined with SUVs. My eyes were scratchy, raw. I felt cloudy from the Ambien. I crossed the front yard, walked out onto the street, and listened. It wasn't in my head or the house. It was there. It was coming from somewhere outside, maybe from next door or down the street, or maybe somewhere beyond our neighborhood altogether. It was impossible to gauge its distance.